Something unusual is happening with your Social Security payment this April. And if you don't catch it now, you could end up planning your entire month around the wrong timeline. For millions of Americans living on fixed income, even a difference of a few days can decide whether bills get paid on time, whether groceries stretch far enough, or whether medications are picked up when they're needed. And here's the part most people don't realize. This month isn't just different, it's advantageous. In fact, April 2026 is shaping up to be one of the most favorable payment schedules we've seen in a long time. But there's a catch. The way the calendar falls this month quietly shifts everything forward. And unless you know exactly where you fall in the system, it's very easy to miss your actual payment date or assume it's the same as last month when it isn't. And that's where people get into difficulty because this isn't just about knowing your usual day. It's about understanding how the system moves and why this month could actually give you a bit more breathing room if you plan it right. So before you make any assumptions about when your money is arriving, you're going to want to see how this entire schedule lays out because once you see it, it changes how you approach the whole month. Hi, I'm June, and if there's one thing I focus on here on VisaPath USA, it's making sure you have clear, accurate, and practical information about your Social Security benefits without confusion, without guesswork, and without having to dig through complicated government language. Because the truth is, you shouldn't have to work this hard just to understand when your own money is coming in. Today, I'm going to walk you step by step through the full April 2026 payment schedule, including SSI, SSDI, retirement, survivor, and spousal benefits, so you know your exact date and exactly how this month is working in your favor. And as we go, I'll show you why April is different, what shifted behind the scenes, and how to use that timing to your advantage. Because once you understand how this calendar lines up, you're not just reacting to your payment, you're actually planning ahead with it. Now, here's where a lot of people get confused, and honestly, it's completely understandable. I hear it all the time. I already know when I get paid, and on the surface, that sounds right. You've been receiving your benefits for years, maybe decades, and your payment usually shows up around the same time each month. So it feels predictable, it feels fixed, but underneath that routine, something is quietly shifting every single month. And that shift is what catches people unprepared because Social Security doesn't actually pay on fixed calendar dates for most people. It runs on a rolling schedule tied to Wednesdays, and those Wednesdays move depending on how the month is structured. That means your payment might not just be a day or two different from last month, it can shift by nearly a full week. And when you're budgeting carefully, when every dollar already has a job, that kind of shift isn't small. That's the difference between paying something early, paying it late, or working hard to make things stretch in between. This is especially important right now in 2026 because so many households are feeling the pressure of what I've been calling the year of affordability. Prices haven't eased the way many hoped they would. Groceries are still high, utilities are unpredictable, and medical costs continue to take a significant portion out of monthly income. So, timing isn't just a technical detail, it's part of how you manage your entire financial rhythm each month. And if that rhythm shifts without you realizing it, it can throw everything off. Which brings us to why April stands out in such a meaningful way and why, for once, the timing is actually leaning in your favor. April 1st, 2026 falls on a Wednesday. Now, that might sound like a small detail, but it's actually the key that unlocks this entire schedule because when the first day of the month lands on a Wednesday, it pulls every other scheduled payment date forward earlier into the month. The second Wednesday comes sooner, the third Wednesday comes sooner, even the fourth Wednesday lands earlier than usual. The entire structure compresses toward the front of the calendar, and that's the exact opposite of what happens in more challenging months when the first falls later in the week, like a Friday or Saturday. In those cases, everything gets pushed back. Payments drift further into the month, sometimes by 5, 6, even 7 days compared to the month before. And that's when people start to feel that gap, that stretch between payments that suddenly feels longer than expected. But April doesn't do that. April pulls everything forward. It gives you earlier access to your funds across every major payment group. And that's why this month is genuinely one of the more favorable setups we've seen in a while. It's cleaner, it's more predictable, and most importantly, it gives you a little more control over your timing at the start of the month instead of forcing you to wait. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to walk you through the exact payment dates, one group at a time, so you know precisely where you fall and exactly when your money is arriving. Let's start right at the beginning of the month because April opens up in a way that is refreshingly simple, especially compared to what we've been dealing with over the past few months. The very first payment going out is for SSI Supplemental Security Income, and that arrives on April 1st, 2026. That's a Wednesday. No delays, no adjustments, no shifting backward into the previous month like we've seen happen repeatedly. And if you've been receiving SSI for a while, you probably remember how inconsistent things have felt recently. Payments showing up at the end of the prior month, dates changing because of weekends or federal holidays. It's been variable, and that makes planning harder than it should be. But this time, everything lands exactly where it's supposed to. April 1st is a regular business day. The Social Security Administration is fully operational, and your payment arrives right on schedule, clean, predictable, and easy to plan around. That kind of consistency matters more than it might seem at first glance. When you know your payment is coming exactly on the first day of the month, it gives you a clear starting point. Rent, groceries, utilities, you can line things up without wondering whether the money will arrive early or late. And after several months of irregular timing, that kind of reliability is a real advantage. Now, before we move on, I want to ask you something quickly because this helps shape what we focus on in future updates. When it comes to your Social Security benefits in 2026, what's the bigger concern for you right now? Is it the timing, just knowing exactly when your payment is arriving so you can plan everything around it? Or is it the amount? Whether your benefit is actually keeping up with your monthly expenses, or maybe it's the uncertainty about future changes and what might happen next. If you have a moment, drop a comment with A, B, or C. I read through these and it helps me focus on what matters most to you. Now, just 2 days after SSI, we move into another very important group, and this one often causes confusion if you're not familiar with how it works. April 3rd, 2026, which falls on a Friday, is the payment date for two specific categories of beneficiaries. First, if you started receiving Social Security benefits before May of 1997, your payment always comes on the 3rd of the month, regardless of what day of the week it falls on. That rule has stayed consistent, and it overrides the Wednesday schedule that most people follow today. The second group included here is what's known as concurrent beneficiaries, those who receive both SSI and Social Security benefits at the same time. If that applies to you, your Social Security portion also arrives on the 3rd. So for both of these groups, April 3rd is your date. And the timing here works out well. Since April 3rd is a Friday, there are no interruptions from weekends or holidays. That means deposits process smoothly, and you can expect your payment without delays or complications. It's another example of how April's calendar is lining things up in a way that just works more smoothly. So, at this point, we already have two key dates clearly established, April 1st for SSI and April 3rd for pre-1997 recipients and dual beneficiaries. But where April really starts to stand out is in the next group where the Wednesday schedule begins and where the early timing becomes even more noticeable depending on your birth date. Now, this is where April really starts to show its advantage because once we move into the standard Wednesday schedule, you begin to see just how early these payments are landing compared to what many of you are used to. If your birthday falls between the 1st and the 10th of the month, any month, it doesn't matter which one, your Social Security payment for April 2026 is scheduled for the second Wednesday of the month, and that date is April 8th, just 8 days into the month. Take a moment and really think about that because this is where the difference becomes very real. In other months, depending on how the calendar falls, that second Wednesday can land on the 12th, the 13th, sometimes even the 14th. That's nearly a full week later than what you're getting in April. And when you're managing a fixed income, that kind of difference isn't minor. It's meaningful. An earlier payment means you're able to cover essentials sooner. It means groceries don't have to be stretched quite as far. It means you're not waiting those extra days hoping nothing unexpected comes up. Even emotionally, it reduces that sense of pressure that can build when you're watching the calendar and counting down to your deposit. So if your birthday is anywhere from the 1st through the 10th, April 8th is your date. And this month, that's a very favorable position to be in. Now, let's move to the next group. Those of you with birthdays between the 11th and the 20th, your payment follows the 3rd Wednesday schedule, which in April 2026 lands on April 15th, right in the middle of the month, clean and straightforward. But just like we talked about earlier, what matters here is not just the date itself, it's how that date compares to other months. because in a less favorable setup, that third Wednesday can drift later, sometimes landing on the 17th, 18th, or even the 19th. And again, that's several extra days of waiting that you simply don't have to deal with this time. April 15th gives you a more balanced timeline. It keeps your payment from slipping too far into the second half of the month, which makes it easier to manage ongoing expenses without feeling like everything is stacked too tightly at the end. It gives you a clearer midpoint, something you can plan around with a bit more confidence. And that's really the theme you should be noticing here. April isn't just about earlier dates, it's about smoother spacing. It's about reducing those long gaps that can create stress between payments. Whether your date falls on the 8th or the 15th, this month is structured in a way that gives you a bit more breathing room than usual. Now, there's still one more group to cover, and if you typically receive your payment later in the month, you're going to want to pay especially close attention because even that final group benefits from April's early calendar shift. Now, let's talk about the group that usually ends up waiting the longest each month, and that's those of you whose birthdays fall between the 21st and the 31st. Under the standard Social Security schedule, your payment arrives on the fourth Wednesday of the month, and in April 2026, that date lands on April 22nd. Now, if you're in this group, you already know what it feels like in those more challenging months when the calendar pushes your payment further back, sometimes to the 24th or even the 25th. And those extra few days can feel especially long when you're trying to make everything last until your deposit arrives. That's typically where the pressure builds the most. But April changes that dynamic. Instead of being pushed deep into the month, your payment comes through on the 22nd, which is noticeably earlier than what you've likely experienced recently. And while it might not sound like a dramatic shift on paper, in practice, it absolutely is. It shortens that waiting period, it brings your income forward, and it gives you a slightly earlier reset point heading into the final stretch of the month. So even if you're in the last group on the schedule, April is still working in your favor. That's really the story of this entire month. Every single category from the earliest to the latest is getting pulled forward into a more manageable timeline. Now, there is one more date on the calendar that I want to address quickly because this is where confusion sometimes starts to appear. April 2026 has a fifth Wednesday, and that falls on April 29th. And every once in a while, people see that extra Wednesday and assume there might be an additional payment group tied to it. But here's the important clarification. There are no standard Social Security payments scheduled for the fifth Wednesday of the month. None. The system only uses the second, third, and fourth Wednesdays for birth date-based payments. So while April 29th does exist on the calendar, it is not a payment date for SSI, SSDI, retirement, or survivor benefits. And I want to be very clear about that so no one is left waiting or questioning at the end of the month. The 5 real payment dates you need to focus on are April 1st, April 3rd, April 8th, April 15th, and April 22nd. Once you know which one applies to you, you can plan with confidence. And just as importantly, you can ignore the uncertainty around dates that don't actually apply. Now, up to this point, we've covered the full schedule in detail, but there's a bigger reason why all of this matters, especially right now, and it goes beyond just knowing dates on a calendar. Because in 2026, timing isn't just about convenience. It's about stability. It's about whether your month flows in a manageable way or whether it feels like you're constantly trying to bridge gaps between payments. And for a lot of people right now, those gaps have been getting harder to manage. We're in a period where everyday costs are still elevated. Grocery bills haven't come back down in a meaningful way. Utility costs can spike without much warning, and healthcare, especially prescriptions, continues to take a steady portion out of monthly income. So when your Social Security payment arrives, even a few days earlier than expected, that's not just a small scheduling detail. That can change how you approach your entire month. It can mean paying something before it becomes overdue instead of after. It can mean restocking essentials before they run out instead of stretching them a little too far. It can mean having just enough breathing room to avoid those moments where everything feels like it's piling up at once. And that's why a month like April stands out, because instead of pushing your finances later into the month, it pulls them forward. And that shift, even if it's only a few days on paper, can have a very real impact in day-to-day life. And this is also why staying informed about these schedules matters more than ever. Because when you understand exactly when your money is coming in, you're not reacting. You're planning. You're making decisions ahead of time instead of managing things in the moment. And that level of control, even in small ways, can make a difficult financial environment feel just a bit more manageable. Now, there's something else I want to touch on here because it's been coming up again and again in conversations, and it ties directly into how far your monthly income actually goes once it arrives, and that's Medicare. A lot of people don't realize how much flexibility there can be within Medicare plans depending on your situation. And over the past several months, I've been hearing from more and more people who took the time to review their options and ended up saving a significant amount of money. In many cases, they found plans with better coverage and lower out-of-pocket costs just by asking a few questions and getting guidance. In fact, within this community alone, the total reported savings has added up to over $2 million. And that's not coming from anything complicated. It's coming from people simply taking that extra step to make sure they're not overpaying for their coverage. So, if you're on Medicare right now and you haven't reviewed your plan recently, it may be worth looking into. Not because you have to change anything, but because if there's an opportunity to reduce your monthly expenses or improve your coverage, that directly affects how far your Social Security income can stretch. And if you do take that step, I'd really like to hear how it goes for you. You can come back and leave a comment with the word chapter so it's easy to spot. I always look through those and it helps highlight what's actually working for people in real situations, not just on paper, but in everyday life. Now, beyond the numbers and the logistics, there's also a very real human side to all of this. And it's something that doesn't always get talked about openly, but it's absolutely there. Because for many people, living on a fixed income in 2026 isn't just about budgeting. It's about navigating a constant level of uncertainty that sits quietly in the background of everyday life. It's that stretch between payments where you start doing mental calculations more often than you'd like. It's deciding which expense gets handled first and which one can wait just a little longer. And sometimes it's that uncomfortable feeling of hoping nothing unexpected happens before your next deposit arrives. And if you felt that even once, you're far from alone. Millions of people are navigating that exact same reality right now. People who worked for decades, who planned as carefully as they could, and who are now dealing with an economic environment that doesn't always line up with those plans. That's not something to ignore or brush aside. It's something to recognize for what it is. Because when you understand that this is a shared experience, it changes how you approach it. It becomes less about reacting in isolation and more about staying informed, staying connected, and using every piece of available information to your advantage. And sometimes something as simple as knowing your exact payment date and knowing it's arriving earlier this month can remove just enough pressure to help you move through the month with a little more confidence. At the same time, there's another layer to all of this that a lot of people have been asking about, and that's what's happening at the policy level. There are ongoing conversations in Washington right now about the long-term future of Social Security, discussions around sustainability, funding, potential adjustments to how benefits are calculated, and what the system might look like in the years ahead. Now, it's important to keep this grounded in reality. As of right now, there are no confirmed changes that would immediately reduce or eliminate current Social Security benefits. Nothing has been passed into law that affects your payments this April or in the immediate future. But the conversations themselves are real and they're active. And historically, when changes do happen, they don't always come with a long preparation period. That's why staying informed matters, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Because when you know what's being discussed and you're paying attention to credible updates, you're in a much better position to respond if anything does shift. So, while April is a positive month in terms of timing, and that's something you can absolutely take advantage of, it's also a reminder of why keeping up with this information matters in the first place, not just for this month, but for what comes next as well. And speaking of making sure everyone is clear on where they stand, there are a couple of specific groups I want to address directly because there's often confusion around how the schedule applies to them. Let's start with those of you receiving survivor benefits or spousal benefits because this is one of the most common areas where confusion shows up. It's easy to assume that because your benefit is based on someone else's work record, your payment schedule might follow a different set of rules, but it doesn't. Your payment date is based on your birth date, not your spouse's. So whether you're receiving benefits as a surviving spouse or based on your current spouse's record, the same exact structure applies. If your birthday falls between the 1st and the 10th, your payment arrives on April 8th. If it falls between the 11th and the 20th, your date is April 15th. And if your birthday is between the 21st and the 31st, your payment comes on April 22nd. The only exceptions are the ones we talked about earlier if you began receiving benefits before May of 1997, or if you're receiving both SSI and Social Security at the same time. In those cases, your payment would arrive on April 3rd instead. But outside of those specific situations, the rule is simple. Your birth date determines your schedule regardless of the type of benefit you receive. Now, I also want to speak directly to those of you receiving SSDI Social Security Disability Insurance, because your situation comes with its own unique challenges, and it's important that everything is as clear as possible. From a scheduling standpoint, SSDI follows the exact same structure as retirement benefits. That means your payment date is also tied to your birth date using those same Wednesday groupings. So again, birthdays from the 1st through the 10th are paid on April 8th, the 11th through the 20th on April 15th, and the 21st through the 31st on April 22nd. And if your benefits began before May 1997, your payment date is April 3rd. But beyond the schedule itself, what makes SSDI different is that for many recipients, this is your primary and sometimes only source of income. There's often little to no flexibility to supplement it, which means timing becomes even more critical. A delay isn't just inconvenient, it can disrupt everything at once. So, knowing your exact date, writing it down, and planning around it isn't just helpful, it's necessary. And in a month like April, where the schedule is working slightly in your favor, that's something you can use to your advantage in a very practical way. Now, at this point, we've covered every group, every category, and every rule that applies to April's schedule. So let's bring everything together in one clear, simple view so you can lock in your exact date and move forward with confidence. So let's simplify everything we've covered and bring it into one clear snapshot you can rely on without having to wonder anything. For April 2026, there are 5 key payment dates. And once you match yourself to the right one, that's all you need to focus on. If you receive SSI, your payment arrives on April 1st. If you began receiving Social Security before May of 1997, or you receive both SSI and Social Security, your payment comes on April 3rd. For everyone else on the standard schedule, it comes down to your birth date. If your birthday falls between the 1st and the 10th, your payment is April 8th. Between the 11th and the 20th, it's April 15th. And between the 21st and the 31st, it's April 22nd. That's the full structure. No hidden dates, no extra payments on the 29th, no variations beyond those rules, just those 5 dates. And this month, every single one of them is positioned earlier than what we typically see. That's what makes April stand out. It's not complicated, it's just aligned in a way that gives you a bit more room to work with. So the most important thing you can do right now is simple. Lock in your date, write it down somewhere you'll actually see it, put it on your calendar, your phone, a note on the fridge, wherever it makes sense for you. Because once you know exactly when your payment is arriving, you can start structuring everything else around it with more certainty. And from there, think about how to use that earlier timing to your advantage this month. Maybe it means paying something ahead of schedule. Maybe it means restocking essentials a little sooner. Or maybe it just means having a bit more peace of mind knowing that your deposit is coming earlier than usual. Whatever that looks like for you, the goal is the same. Less stress, more control. If you know someone else who relies on Social Security, a friend, a neighbor, a family member, make sure they have this information too. A lot of people assume their payment date never changes. And that's where confusion starts. Sharing something as simple as this schedule can make a real difference in how someone plans their month. And if you're on Medicare and haven't taken a closer look at your current plan recently, consider doing that as well. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about when your money comes in, it's about how far it actually goes once it does. Finally, if there's something specific you want to see covered next, whether it's future payment schedules, benefit changes, or anything that's been on your mind, leave a comment and say what's most important to you right now. That's how these updates continue to stay focused on what actually matters in real life because you've earned these benefits. This isn't uncertainty and it's not a favor. It's something you paid into, something you rely on, and something you deserve to understand clearly. Take this information, use it, plan around it, and move through April knowing exactly where you